Hey there, my name is Nicole Emerson. I'm one of the health promotion specialists in Edmonton, and I'm going to be going through the Mental Fitness and Suicide Awareness Annual Briefing. So when you look at the image used in this first slide, it's one that we are all familiar with and recognize as strengthening and building physical fitness. And the goal of this presentation is to have you consider what you are currently doing to build and strengthen your mental fitness. What does that look like, or what would that look like for you? What are ways that you push yourself out of your comfort zone in safe ways in order to build that mental toughness? And that is going to be really highlighted throughout this presentation when we consider those things. And as with the other presentations, we do have the disclaimer that the presentation you are about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense, Strengthening the Forces Health Promotion. Any reproduction or retransmission of the slides contained in this presentation is strictly forbidden. And finally, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge where we are, the land we are on, and how we came to be here as we move forward in spirit of truth and reconciliation. I'd like to acknowledge that in Edmonton, Namao, and surrounding area, we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route to the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. So as I briefly described with the first slide, this is an overview of the topics that will be covered in this briefing, starting with how we define mental health and mental fitness, and how we can work towards building our mental toughness, and then using the mental health continuum model as a way of describing what some noticeable signs may be for someone that has deteriorating mental health. We're then going to look at some common myths when it comes to mental health, and then we'll end with how we can have a conversation with someone who may be struggling and get them to the resources that they need. So starting with mental fitness, AKA grit. I like using the term grit and breaking it down as an acronym and standing for growth, resilience, initiative, and tenacity. And there's no doubt that extreme situations really test our courage and our perseverance and our mental toughness. But what about everyday circumstances? Mental toughness is like a muscle, and it needs to be worked in order to grow and develop. Just like we would go to the gym to work on our physical fitness, to strengthen our muscles, we need to do the same for our mental fitness. And if you haven't pushed or challenged yourself in small ways, you may be less prepared to face those difficult circumstances that really test your limits. We also use the term grit when describing mental toughness, as it's also our passion to achieve long-term goals. Grit is about having stamina. It's looking at life as a marathon and not a sprint. And it's about how you define your personal success and what gives you purpose in achieving those long-term goals. Now, comparing that to resilience, and resilience by definition is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, is toughness, and the ability to spring back or bounce back from hardship or difficulties. And resilience is a concept that has been widely embraced by militaries all around the world, including the CAF. And the CAF has a culture of strength. They want members to be strong and want members to be willing to go into adversity. The challenge arises when a member's adaptive stability starts to wear down and when the ability to bounce back gets less, either because of prolonged exposure to stressors over which there may be little or no control, or because there are other factors that are impacting the resilience of the member. So let's start small by looking at ways that you can start to build your mental toughness by challenging yourself on a day-to-day basis. And we're going to look at that through forming habits and looking at our daily routines and ways that we can incorporate those. And defining what mental toughness means to you. What challenges you? What would push you outside of your comfort zone? And the ideas here come from the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's just that, it's coming back to your habits and ways that you can tweak them or shift them in a way that, again, pushes you outside of your comfort zone and is ideally going to start to build that mental resilience or mental toughness. So the first one, it could be sticking to a regular workout routine that goes above and beyond what is required for unit PT. For some, it could be choosing healthier foods and meal planning, which takes more time, takes more effort, but it certainly pays off in the long run. For some, it could be completing and submitting tasks ahead of schedule, whether that be for work or for school or for something else. Some may choose to meditate every morning, making this a priority for them in order to set themselves up for the day. Perhaps it's calling a friend or a family member and taking that extra step to be the one to reach out and not waiting for that to happen, have them reach out to you. So making a point to do that, whether that's every week or on the weekend, or as described here, every Saturday. And then lastly, it could be spending at least an hour every evening doing something that you enjoy. So it could be something creative, it could be a hobby, but making that time to make that happen and to do that. And then looking at the definition for what mental fitness is and how it refers to a state of psychosocial well-being. The definition of mental fitness really underpins the necessity of ensuring that we spend as much time working on developing fitness in this area as we do working on our physical fitness. And in fact, without adequate mental fitness, it can become almost impossible to work on any other aspect of our well-being. So it's very important that we are paying attention to this. And then when we consider the balance aspect and how it's about finding a balance in all of these areas of our life, including physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional health. It involves effective functioning in our daily activities, which results in being productive at work, at school, in our personal lives as caregivers, whatever it may be. It means having healthy relationships in our lives, and then also the ability or having the ability to adapt to change and cope with adversity. The challenge is that everyone has a breaking point, and it's when life becomes too much, too overwhelming, or simply just out of balance and gets to be too much. That's when things really start or can start to go sideways. So take a moment and reflect. Think about if you know what your personal warning signs are. How do you know when you need to employ additional coping strategies or seek assistance or support in order to maintain your mental health or your mental fitness? And we're going to use the mental health continuum model as a guide for noticeable signs of changes in mood and functioning and how we can pick up on that, sometimes in ourselves, but most likely in other people. So simply by looking at mood and how someone, depending on where they are in the continuum, depending on what is going on for them, what their circumstances are, there may be changes in their mood that become more noticeable. So for someone, they may have become more impatient. Maybe it's starting to get into some more anger outburst. And as a result, there could be an increase of substance use. So these are very noticeable signs that anyone can recognize. And those red flags, they're telling us that there's something wrong and there's reason to check in. Because as the problems increase, functioning decreases, and reactions to chronic stress can become severe enough to interfere with daily life. So depending on where someone finds themselves in the continuum, there are things that they can do that can help. When someone finds themselves closer to the right, if they are in struggling or in crisis, there's going to be more of that need for medical and professional intervention. In the green and the thriving and surviving, we have more of a personal responsibility of taking care of ourselves, but we also need that support in order to ensure that we are able to take care of ourselves. And mental health, like physical health, is something that we all have. 1 in 5 or 20% of Canadians has a mental health issue every year, but 5 out of 5 Canadians have a state of mental health, or 5 out of 5 humans, I could say, have a state of mental health. Good mental health requires more than the mere absence of a mental illness. It is a state of being and key to your overall health. Think about, how do you feel about yourself right now? How do you relate to others? Do you have a sense of purpose or a sense of meaning in your life and what you're doing, both personally or professionally? What are your passions? What motivates you and brings you happiness? These are just some of the questions to consider when considering your own state of mental health and how you are currently doing. And lastly, what is mental illness? So referring to collectively to all diagnosable mental disorders or health conditions. And as we saw with the mental health continuum model, we need to pay attention to those changes that are negatively impacting an individual's ability to function and cope. And we're going to see that through those changes in thinking and how they're behaving, the emotional behavioral response. Those are all going to be those key indications that there's something more going on. Now, looking at some common myths about mental health, the first one is that mental toughness means hiding any signs of weakness. So, of course, that is a myth. Mental toughness is about being real with yourself and realizing that you are not bulletproof. It's okay to not be okay. And that does not make you weak. The next myth is that real strength is the ability to control emotions at all times and not let things get to you. We know that real strength is facing whatever challenges arise and knowing when to ask for help. It's also about being able to feel a variety of emotions and recognizing when we are struggling. It's not easy to ask for help. It's not easy to admit to ourselves that we need help or to admit that to anyone else. but it takes a great amount of strength in order to do so. The next one is depression is a sign of personal weakness. We know that depression is a real illness. It is not a personal sign of weakness for anyone. It's a real condition. And lastly, anyone with enough willpower ought to just be able to snap out of it. Depression, or any mental illness for that matter, isn't overcome by willpower alone. You need to learn and acquire new skills and establish supports in order to overcome and manage it. But it's not solely about willpower. Now imagine a world where we treated a mental injury the same way as a physical injury. We're making small strides in this direction, but we're not entirely there yet. And so imagine that we're able to be, or everyone was just as supportive and accepting of anxiety as they would be to a sprained ankle, where acceptance of seeking help is extended to any injury, visible or not. It's critical from a leadership perspective to create an environment where you can be strong and also allows for the space to say, hey, I'm not okay. Now, Major Clark was a panelist in the CAF Men's Health panel during Men's Health Month and offered some insight around human-centered leadership. So he notes that there are 3 critical elements for human-centered leaders to develop and push forward for better health. And the first one is culture. And there's a lot of culture change going on. We see that everywhere, not just in the military. And there's a need to create a culture that destigmatizes mental health issues and promotes an understanding for an individual's situation. This can only be achieved with empathy. The next one is to be authentic. People follow leaders who are authentic, and authentic leaders are transparent and lead in the right direction. And the last one is being able to self-reflect and ensuring that you're taking care of yourself. So reflecting on what you said or could have said in a situation, reflect on how you felt and what made you feel that way. He also says that effective leaders know how to take care of themselves. They don't just talk the talk, but they walk the walk and role model that behavior and are transparent about that. Self-care is critical for everyone. It's not optional, whether that's spending time with your family, being present in the moment, focusing on yourself, and ensuring that you're eating well, getting enough sleep, staying active. It's always needed, and it's an integral part to building and maintaining good mental fitness. So the bottom line is that these elements set you in the right direction in which you can properly lead and encourage subordinates, peers, personnel to seek help when they need it, and to destigmatize mental health issues because they are a real thing and we need to be well aware of their impact. We can challenge ourselves each day in order to build and improve our mental fitness. And just as we train our physical fitness to meet physical demands, we can train and test our mental fitness to prepare us for life's demands. When something unexpected happens that challenges us and may knock us down, recovery is possible. Just like a herniated disc in your back or a torn ligament in your knee would set you back, a mental setback can have a recovery and a treatment plan. Although there aren't exact guidelines for how long it may take, to recover from a mental health injury, it doesn't mean that recovery isn't possible. It takes patience, it takes time, support, and work in order to get better and back on the road to recovery. Now, looking at how we can support someone who may have their mental health challenged, or you may notice that decline in their mental health. So when you have a gut feeling that something isn't right, the only way you'll know is by starting a conversation. Be curious, ask questions, start a dialogue, get a sense for how they are doing. So the next slides are going to describe how that can happen. Because as this slide says, a conversation can change a life. It could save a life. So first, check in with yourself. How are you doing? Do you have the time to listen? Do you have the time to start this conversation? Are you prepared for where this conversation could go? Do you have supports in place for yourself to ensure that you are looking after your own well-being? Are you the right person to have this conversation, or is there someone better suited? So consider these things before engaging in this conversation. Ensure that you have enough time, ensure that you're prepared. And as long as you do something, that is the most important thing. So how you can help? You can ask, listen, encourage action, and check in. So the first one with asking, and it's just that. Ask them how they're doing. Pretty simple. It may not be about suicide, but it also could be. The only way you'll know is by starting that conversation and deciding based on what they're saying or not saying, their body language, and your gut feeling, if you feel the need to ask about suicide. If you do get to the point and need to ask the question, be sure to ask clearly and directly and without judgment. Asking shows a willingness to help. Now it's time for us to listen. We are giving the other person space to talk and share their darkness, share whatever it is that they're going through. And it isn't easy. It's human nature to want to jump to problem solving. We want to help. We want to let them know about the resources, and we want to connect them to these resources, which are all important things and all important steps to take. It's just not the time yet. This is a very vulnerable time for someone being able to share what they're going through. And it could be very healing for them to have an opportunity to talk about it. And they may feel less alone in being able to talk to you about this. Practice asking questions that encourage them to open up without sounding like you're interrogating them. So things like, that can't be easy. How long have you felt this way? How have you been coping with all of this? Have you felt this way before? If yes, what helped last time? If no, what's different this time? Remember to be open-minded to the reality and truth of their situation without judgment. You can have acceptance of what they're going through without understanding. And remember, you don't have to have all the answers, and you're not expected to, but you can show empathy, hear and acknowledge what they are going through, show you care, and when it's time, talk about those resources that you can connect them to. So you'll get to that point in the conversation where you encourage them to seek help. You could say something like, I'm concerned about you and I want to help. There are resources that we can access Can you tell me who else you would feel comfortable talking to? Keep in mind that accessing resources can be hard and especially overwhelming to someone who is already feeling overloaded. Discuss possible resources, see what they would be open to, or if there is a resource they have used in the past and would like to try again. The goal is to keep them as involved as much as possible, because the more involvement they have, the more likely it is that they will cooperate and follow through and accept the help. You also want to establish a keep safe plan where they agree that they will not do anything to further their suicidal thoughts or activate their plan. Ensure that they have emergency contact numbers like the Canadian Suicide Prevention Service crisis line, which I'll share at the end of this presentation, where they can call at any time, any day, to speak to a trained counselor if ever they felt like they couldn't keep themselves safe and need immediate support. And lastly, check in. This final step can happen at any point after the intervention. And it's as simple as, hey, how's it going? How have you been since we talked last? You're showing them that they are still not alone, and you are able to get a sense of how they're doing. If they've been off work, maybe it's giving them a call to see how they're doing. Go for a coffee, catch up, connect with them on a human level. This lets them know that they matter and it can mean everything to them. So some key takeaways for this presentation. Find ways to challenge yourself. And remember, at the end of the day, we need to take care of ourselves before we can take care of anyone else. It's the oxygen mask on an airplane analogy that everyone has heard. Look for opportunities to meet your own needs before supporting others. We need to lead by example. We need to be empathetic. And if you can't manage your own stress, or if there's just too much going on and things are getting out of balance, know when to ask for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength, and it takes a brave person to fight and overcome. And then navigate conversations with an open mind. Be caring, be authentic, and be genuine. And please reach out to the health promotion team if you'd like more training around this area in terms of if it's strengthening your communication skills that you would like to look at with our interpersonal communications course, or with the mental fitness and suicide awareness course to get more awareness around recognizing the signs and how to continue on to building mental fitness and protecting your mental fitness, and then further exploring how to do that intervention. We have our CAF Connection website where you can find out what's happening in health promotion, register for courses in person, any virtual workshops that we have available. And you can also find us on social media if you want to follow along and get any health tips or anything like that. And if you or someone you know is struggling, remember that you are not alone and help is available. The CIFMAP number is an excellent resource to be aware of, 1-800-268-7708. And also the Canada Suicide Prevention Services Crisis Support with the phone number 1-833-456-4566, which is available 24/7. The text is time sensitive in the day, so the phone number primarily would be the best contact for them. Thank you, and that is it for this presentation.